Parivrajagachajastotarasatya Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Swami Sri Raghava ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya's Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Prem Sikaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana ki Sri Vrindavan Mathura Dham ki Sri Dwarka Dham ki Sri Jagannath Puri Dham ki Sri Navadvip Mayapur Dham ki Sri Mayapur Chandradev Mandir ki Gangamayi Jamunamayi ki Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi ki Harinama Sankirtan ki Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda ki Transcendental Book Distribution ki Jai Sri Sri Gurnitai ki Jai Sri Sri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi ki Jai Sri Krishna Balaram ki Jai Sri Giri Govardhana ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Madhava ki Jai Nitai Gaur Pimanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and to Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Nastapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Jata Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Syam Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savarutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakam Scha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kansana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutivi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpa Tirubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Vyaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudiraya. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatm, which is our very means of conquest, let us first offer our respectful obeisances unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayesh Sabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. By rendering service, by regularly attending Srimad Bhagavatam class, and by rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed practically to nil, and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahma Samhitam Uttama Shloka Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Anyam Svasayanam Maha. This scripture named the Srimad Bhagavatm is the literary incarnation of God, and it is compiled by Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people, and it is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Shri Sarabhyai Namaha Om Shri Sarabhyai Namaha Om Shri Sarabhyai Namaha Mukam karoti vāchanam pangum nangayate girim yatkripat maham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam yatkripat maham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam. I'd like to welcome everyone to the morning class today, and we have started a new chapter as of yesterday. That is from first canto Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter number 5, Narada's instructions on Srimad Bhagavatam for Vyasadeva, and we are reading.
Second.
Actually, yesterday we read 2. So
only.
Huh?
We disciple we did not read. Sir.
Second we read. Second we read the verse and the purport also. The last line of the purport was, one cannot be cheerful by nature, remember? Unless one is actually seated in self-realization. So text number 3 today. Jijñāsitam susampannam api te mahad-adbhutam kṛtavān bhāratam yas tvam sarvārtha-paribṛṁhitam jijñāsitam susampannam api te mahad-adbhutam kṛtavān bhāratam yas tvam sarvārtha-paribṛṁhitam jijñāsitam susampannam api te mahad-adbhutam kṛtavān bhāratam tvam sarvārtha-paribṛṁhitam jijñāsitaṁ susampannam apite mahad-adbhutam kṛtavān bhāratam tvam sarvārtha-paribṛṁhitam
jijñāsitam susampannam apite mahad-adbhutam kṛtavān bhāratam tvam sarvārtha-paribṛṁhitam
jijñāsitam susampannam apite mahad-adbhutam kṛtavān bhāratam yastvam sarvārtha-paribṛṁhitam
jijñāsitam susampannam apite mahad-adbhutam kṛtavān bhāratam yastvam sarvārtha-paribṛṁhitam
jijñāsitam susampannam apite mahad-adbhutam kṛtavān bhāratam yastvam sarvārtha-paribṛṁhitam
jijñāsitam fully inquired susampannam well versed api in spite of te your mahat-adbhutam great and wonderful kṛtavān prepared bhāratam the Mahābhārata tvam what you have done sarva-artha including all sequences paribṛṁhitam elaborately explained. A translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. No doubt your inquiries were full and your studies also well fulfilled, since you have prepared a great and wonderful work, the Mahābhārata, which is full of all kinds of Vedic sequences, elaborately explained. Kindly repeat after me. No doubt your inquiries were full, and your studies also well fulfilled, since you have prepared a great and wonderful work, the Mahābhārata, which is full of all kinds of Vedic sequences, elaborately explained. Purport. The despondency of Vyasadeva was certainly not due to his lack of sufficient knowledge, because as a student he had fully inquired about the Vedic literatures, as a result of which the Mahābhārata is compiled. with full explanation of the Vedas. Translation again. No doubt your inquiries were full and your studies also well fulfilled, since you have prepared a great and wonderful work, the Mahābhārata, which is full of all kinds of Vedic sequences, elaborately explained. We'll read a few verses that continue the same thread before coming to Krishna's actual response. Not Krishna, Narada. So text 4. Jijñāsitam aditam cha brahmayat tat sanatanam tathapi so chasyat manam akṛtavān iva prabhu. So this is Sri Narada Muni continuing. You have fully delineated the subject matter, the subject of impersonal Brahman, as well as the knowledge derived therefrom. Why should you be despondent in spite of all this, thinking that you are undone, my dear Prabhu? Purport. The Vedanta Sutra, or Brahma Sutra, compiled by Sri Vyasadeva, is the full deliberation of the impersonal absolute feature, and it is accepted as the most exalted philosophical exposition in the world. It covers the subject of eternity, and the methods are scholarly, so there cannot be any doubt about the transcendental scholarship of Vyasadeva. So why should he lament? So in these two verses, Narada Muni is pointing out how Srila Vyasadeva compiled quite extensively the Vedic literatures, including, which is not a small feat actually, the Mahābhārata. And here also explaining about the Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta Sutra is considered as the actually the last portion of the Vedic knowledge, or a summary, summarized in code form. Of course, the Vedanta Sutra, as explained here, also referred to as the Brahma Sutra, is especially describing about the impersonal aspect or impersonal features. So it means that actually Srila Vyasadeva had written very, very extensively on so many subject matters and presented in a very, as Prabhupada explains, actually, in a very scholarly manner also. Of course, we will understand after a few verses, and Prabhupada makes this point as well. There are many many scholarly people. There have always been many scholarly people, great philosophers throughout the history of mankind. And generally philosophers, they try to explain and understand about so many things, especially about the absolute truth. However, simply becoming or simply being scholarly will not bring one full understanding or satisfaction. Vedic literatures is beyond just scholarly knowledge, and that's why just like in the Western countries, different universities, they have departments of Oriental studies. They try to study some of the ancient texts from India, and they get into such works as Srimad Bhagavatm and Bhagavad Gita, etc. But Prabhupada points out in another place how one cannot factually understand the essence of the Vedic knowledge simply by one's scholarly abilities. Actually, even if one is, sometimes it's actually better that one not be a scholar to understand the Vedic knowledge. Because generally speaking, those who are very much absorbed in scholarly research, they will fail to understand the essence of the Vedic knowledge, because just like this verse is explained, Atā Sri Krishna Namadi na bhavet grayam indriyai. By our limited material senses and also limited material mind, we cannot understand subject matters of a transcendental nature. And it can only be understood sevan mukhe ijivado swayameva spuratyata. So this will become revealed in the next few verses. We'll continue to read text number 5. Now it is Srila Vyasadeva who's responding. Astyeva me sarvam idam tvayuktam tathapi natma paritushyate me tanmulam avyaktam agadha bodham prichamahe tvam bhāratam. Srila Vyasadeva said, all you have said about me is perfectly correct. Despite all this, I am not satisfied, or I am not pacified. I therefore question you about the root cause of my dissatisfaction. For you are a man of unlimited knowledge, due to your being the offspring of one, Brahma, who is self-born, without mundane father and mother. So a short purport by Srila Prabhupada. In the material world, everyone is engrossed with the idea of identifying the body or the mind with the self. As such, all knowledge disseminated in the material world is related either with the body or with the mind. And that is the root cause of all despondencies. This is not always detected, even though one may be the greatest erudite scholar in materialistic knowledge. It is good, therefore, to approach a personality like Narada to solve the root cause of all despondencies. Why Narada should be approached is explained below. So same point being made here, that when one is, and that's the situation for most people, most intellectual people, most scholars, because they try to see or understand things using their material senses or material mind. Therefore, they cannot arrive at anything actually conclusive. So text number 6. Savai babam veda samastagoyam upasito yat purusha puranaha paravaresho manasaiva vishvana srijatyavathyati gunair asangaha. My Lord, everything that is mysterious is known to you, because you worship the creator and destroyer of the material world and the maintainer of the spiritual world, the original personality of Godhead, who is transcendental to the three modes of material nature. Purport. A person who is 100% engaged in the service of the Lord is the emblem of all knowledge. Such a devotee of the Lord is in full perfection of devotional service, is also perfect by the qualification of the personality of Godhead. As such, the eightfold perfections of mystic power, Astasiddhi, constitute very little of his godly opulence. A devotee like Narada can act wonderfully by his spiritual perfection, which every individual is trying to attain. Srila Narada is a 100% perfect living being, although not equal to the personality of Godhead. And the last verse, tvam paryatan arka iva trilokim antascharo vayur ivat mas sakshi parabare brahmani dharmato vratais natasya me nyunam alam vichakshva. This is again Srila Vyasadeva continuing. Like the sun, your goodness can travel everywhere in the three worlds. And like the air, you can penetrate the internal region of everyone. As such, you are as good as the all-pervasive Supersoul. Please, therefore, find out the deficiency in me, despite my being absorbed in transcendence, under disciplinary regulations and vows. Purport. Transcendental realization, pious activities, worship, worshipping the deities, charity, mercifulness, non-violence, and studying the scriptures under strict disciplinary regulations are always helpful. We will keep the next verse for tomorrow, actually, where Narada Muni will begin. So, in this last verse here, Srila Prabhupada is giving a list of various activities which are conducive, which are helpful, which we should be practicing as well, such as the performance of pious activities, worshipping the deities, performing charity, studying the Shastra. But ultimately, one must be favored by the mercy of a personality like Sri Narada Muni. And this will be more clearly elaborated or explained in the next few verses, or the rest of the chapter as well. That unless one becomes very focused on the essence of what the Vedic literatures are all about, which is ultimately devotional service to the Lord, one may be sometimes distracted or allured by various, because Vedic literatures, they contain so much of knowledge. So much of knowledge is there. And there are so many aspects also to understand the world of transcendence. Therefore, one of the points which is being underlined here is the even for practicing devotees, for all of us who are practicing devotees, unless we are favored by the presence and the direction and guidance of senior Vaishnavas, senior devotees, unless we take shelter and guidance of the spiritual master, then even though we may have so much of knowledge, even though we may be practicing in so many different ways, it is not simply based on all of the different activities we may be performing. In other words, the intervention or the mercy and blessings of the spiritual master are very essential. And of course, this will be highlighted in this narration of that we're reading now between, Srila Vyasadeva, as we all know, was already a most exalted personality. Still, he was feeling this way, despondent, not fully satisfied. So, tomorrow's text, we will resist the temptation of going to it today. We'll very clearly explain in the ultimate issue. It means that we as devotees have to completely become fixed on and focused on what is the most essential, and that is developing, reawakening our loving devotional service to Krishna. Prabhupada would explain that we may be engaged, we may be performing so many activities, and he would speak in the context also of people practicing in other religions. But the test is whether we are actually developing our love and devotion for Krishna. Whether this natural love and devotion, which is the character and quality of the spirit soul, is being evoked, is being awakened, isn't it? Whether we are developing, this is nicely explained actually by Srila Rupa Goswami in the Nectar of Devotion. If one is developing a strong attachment, these are the descriptions after one reaches the stage of steadiness in devotional service. Nistha, the beginning process. Ado shraddha tatu sadhu sangha bhajana kriya anartha nivriti nistha. Nistha. Actually, most devotees, what to speak of non-devotees, most devotees have a hard time coming to or remaining on the level of nistha. And what is being referred to here actually are levels that are higher than nistha. Nistha means primarily to become situated in the mode of goodness. Above nistha there is ruchi, developing a taste for practicing devotional service, and also asakti, a strong attachment to performing devotional service, strong attachment to associating with devotees. These two levels are very important and will gradually introduce us to these the two highest level, isn't it, of devotional service that are described as bhava and prema. So these of course are very high levels of devotional service, but this is what will be stressed and underlined here by Narada Muni. That in all of our practices and endeavors, somehow or other we have to come to these levels, and that can only happen when we totally become, we could say, disenchanted or disinterested in all kinds of material activities or material alertness. This will go on for many days.
Up to Sankranti.
When does it actually start?
There's no fixed time. Before Sankranti, 20 days of 1 month they start.
Well, it's the first day today that we're... Anyways. Any comments or questions on this? Yes?
Actually, Maharaj, why Supreme Lord is favoring Mayavadis? Because the prime reference for the Mayavadis is from the Vedanta Sutra, and he has written the Vedanta Sutra. Why they are favored more, and then Bhagavatam came into existence?
Why the Lord is favoring more Vedanta Sutra?
Not Mayavadis.
Oh, why Mayavadis?
Yeah, because the prime reference to the Mayavadis is from Vedanta Sutra.
Yeah, correct.
So why it was written by the Vedanta Sutra, then the Bhagavatam, Mahābhārata?
Why Mayavadis, or what? Okay, because Srila Vyasadeva, the last that he wrote actually was Vedanta Sutra. Because Srila Vyasadeva wrote the Vedanta Sutra, that's one of the reasons why he was feeling despondent, because in the Vedanta Sutra, although it speaks about the Absolute Truth, it speaks about one aspect of the Absolute Truth, isn't it? And therefore, this is the whole Leela that is taking place here, that Narada Muni will be pointing out that in all of the various writings that you have composed, you have not sufficiently explained or spoken about the highest level of that Absolute Truth. You've spoken about the Absolute Truth and very elaborately described in a very scholarly manner as well, but he's pointing out, he will be pointing out, especially in tomorrow's verse, that you have not sufficiently focused, and therefore it means that anyone in a similar manner who is devoid of that understanding or knowledge, so devoid of the understanding and knowledge of the personal feature or the personal aspect, and therefore Narada Muni, after instructing Srila Vyasadeva, will, we could say, correct that aspect and inspire Srila Vyasadeva to then write the Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's not that Krishna is favoring Mayavad or Vedanta Sutra. It is. It should be seen as the beginning level, we could say, of transcendence, and because the personal dimension or personal aspect, personal feature of that Absolute Truth is something which is very confidential. So unless one has the proper inclination or this disposition, one will not so easily be able to. So Mayavadis, they stop at their study of the Vedanta Sutra. Prabhupada points out somewhere how Sripad Shankaracharya did not. He wrote commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, but he did not touch the Srimad Bhagavatam because Srimad Bhagavatam is totally in a category by itself, dealing directly with the absolute, the personal feature of the absolute truth. Why it happens, Krishna has reasons for making some of these things happen the way they do. You know, like the very obvious question, well, why Srila Vyasadeva would feel despondent in the first place,
Yes.
being an incarnation of Godhead.
Yes, yes.
Isn't it? Yeah. And that question we were addressing a few days back, and pointing out also how, well, in a similar way, Arjuna also, being a pure devotee of the Lord, should not have become perplexed or confused. Krishna, as we know, arranges things for various purposes that we may not always understand. But as we read the ongoing description of what will be taking place, Narada Muni will give more insight into the whole matter. Yeah. Any other? Yes.
Here actually Srila Vyasadeva asks to find out the deficiency in me, actually saying this to know his own deficiencies actually.
Yes.
So sometimes we have the scriptures, nectar of devotion, nectar of instructions, which may help us in our own self-assessment. But
Yeah.
sometimes my mind says that no, you are doing well, everything is fine. But how do we actually have this assessment done by an externally how can it be done?
How can we have an assessment?
Done by an external, like Vyasadeva is approaching Narada Muni, but in terms of association, how do we have this assessment done rather than depending on my own assessment, which could be faulty?
Yes. Well, that's why it is always recommended that we associate with devotees, and that we have devotees who can more easily assess certain things that maybe we cannot ourselves, understand. It's explained, for example, when Srila Sanatana Goswami was preparing himself actually to join Lord Chaitanya's movement on he was already a very great scholar, a very great devotee, but he was surrounding himself every day with some 20, 30 brahmanas, Vaishnava brahmanas, studying the Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is a regular feature we see in Vrindavan amongst the Goswamis, for example, that they would spend a substantial amount of time, quality time, in reading and studying the Vedic literatures, so that certain aspects that we may not understand fully or clearly can be brought out by others, you see. So two things. One is that, and this is very much in line with our movement, as Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement, by ourselves in Kali Yuga especially, very difficult, practically impossible to make spiritual advancement by ourselves. Therefore, the importance of congregational preaching, of coming together, of reading and studying together, and also the importance of having senior Vaishnavas to whom we can turn to when there are doubts, possibly, and our understanding of certain aspects. So what you're pointing out is true. We may not always ourselves be able to understand some aspects of the philosophy or whatever it may be, and therefore it is recommended to have the opportunity to take help from senior Vaishnavas.
Is Bhagavatam meant for every section of people, man? Like, because Bhagavatam addresses various subject matters.
Whether the Bhagavatam is meant for all sections of people?
Yeah.
Yes, Bhagavatam is especially given in Kali Yuga, the whole gift that is given by Srila Vyasadeva is especially meant for those in the age of Kali. So the entire Srimad Bhagavatam is when one reads it, our acharyas recommend that we read the Srimad Bhagavatam very systematically, and there is emphasis naturally on taking up the chanting of the holy name, and by taking it up in a systematic manner, then one will gradually be sufficiently purified to understand the various subject matters that are presented. So previously, for example, the original Vedic writings could not be studied by everyone, especially because of the way they were written. Only those who had very good knowledge of Sanskrit, for example, could understand or could even read those original Vedic literatures. The special feature of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and this is nicely explained actually by Srila Jiva Goswami, their special feature is that it is written in a way that everyone can access to that, and especially for us who are members of ISKCON, because of Srila Prabhupada having presented the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's just like, Srila Vyasadeva took the essence of the Vedic knowledge and presented it in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then Srila Prabhupada, through his purports, he took the essence of the Bhagavatam and further explained actually in the various purports that he is presenting, taking advantage of the various commentaries of our main acharyas. So in other words, we have, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and the previous acharyas, including of course Srila Vyasadeva, we have the most perfect knowledge in the form of the Bhagavatam presented in such a way that anyone can have access and derive the maximum benefit from it. Yeah. Any other? Okay, so we'll close here. Jai Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Gaura Premanande
Bhakti Raghava Swami Maharaj ki